Hello, hello, hello. My name is Devin Domingo. I am a solutions engineer here at BetterCloud. And I'm here to talk to you today about how you could start to trigger your onboarding using a tool like Google Forms. But let's talk about this process that I've been hearing a lot about in the field, especially when it comes to new hires and offboardings and role changes. Sometimes the best and easiest thing to do is to put it into a Google Form. So this is a sample process that I've heard about where basically HR receives a new employee has started or is joining soon. And what HR will usually do to IT, or even they will give it to directly to the hiring manager to give to IT, essentially a form about all that employee's information. So things like their name, their email, their department, title, manager, equipment that they may need, what have you, all go into this Google form. What happens then is the help desk then reviews all the responses to this form, and then they go off to the races and they start their SaaS provisioning. So they're creating users in Google, they're creating them in Slack, they're setting them up with all their different groups and roles and permissions, and ensuring that that process is being met. They're also ensuring that HR knows that when they're done, and the hiring manager knows, hey, they've gotten all their accounts and they're ready to go. And basically now that employee is now gaining access to all those different systems on day one. So what I want to talk about and where BetterCloud's really going to fit in is where we talk about this middle piece where help desk is manually creating these accounts. They're setting up groups, roles, permissions, all those entitlements. BetterCloud can help with SaaS automation. Using our Manage Plus product, essentially what you're able to do is start to use that form data to create all those accounts for you. So what we do is on those new form submissions, we'll read those first names, those last names, those email fields, everything that's going to the form today, and we'll start to grant access to all those important tools. So with that, let's jump into a demo and show you a little bit about how it works. All right, so first step, I'll provide the link in the article, but essentially first thing is we want to make sure you're going to copy a form template. This is just a suggestion, just ensuring that you have an idea of what a sample onboarding form would look like. So with this link, just click make a copy, and it should allow you to save one that you could save directly to your instance of Google Workspace. This is a sample of what one of those onboarding forms looks like. So it's collecting first name, last name, email, department, manager, secondary or personal email, phone number. There's just a couple other things like if you want to add additional questions. I have this idea of like a support request as well. If you want to list specific applications that maybe you want to give some options on as part of the onboarding, locations, employee classification. Ultimately, work with your HR team to determine what absolutely must be on this sheet and on this form and that you need to collect. But ultimately, you're going to want to consider what do you do today in something like Google Workspace when you create those users and add different emails and different profile fields to them. And also think about sometimes how you need to reference some of these fields as you're creating things across SaaS. We've seen people add things like GitHub username, what their Mac or PC device preferences, and adding those additional pieces to the form as well. You're also ensuring that you're enabling responses and sheets as a part of this process. And what you should start to get is something that looks like this on the back end. Now, once you've kind of configured this form, what you will then do is basically there's another link that we have that allows you to copy and paste some code that we have into AppScript. The way you get into AppScript, it's under the extensions menu under AppScript. One thing to add to this sheet, what we recommend is after you've completed all the questions that you want to add to the form, as your last column, make it something that's called status, or basically something that's going to help track how these submissions are being submitted to BetterCloud. So I put in a status column and I've said that, hey, when on submission, these will be called submitted. I'll show you how we program that logic into the script. You're going to copy and paste something out of paste bin that will go here. And that's where all the logic is of how we're going to start triggering these onboardings with BetterCloud via Google Forms. It will look something like this. So when you copy and paste this code into AppScript, it should look something like this. Should go down all the way down to about line 526. And then one thing that you'll do here between lines 19 to 22 is what do you want it to type to that column when something gets submitted over form. So I just put the form submitted. There's also this concept of adding ignore columns. If let's say HR is going to be submitting some information that you're not going to need necessarily when creating the SaaS accounts or any organizational fields. Basically, these are columns that the script will ignore and make sure we're not really reading any data off those for our own privacy and just for the ease of the script. Great. So now once you have your script configured, you're ready to go. There's a couple steps that we'll have to do here in BetterCloud before the script is fully enabled and running. You'll start over here in the integration center. You must be a super admin or an admin who's able to configure and install different integrations in their BetterCloud. But you'll notice there's this create an extended integration here in the top right-hand corner. If you're not seeing this, just talk with your customer success manager or support. They'll be able to figure out if you have the right subscription type of BetterCloud to get this enabled. But essentially, you would start here. We would name this something like Google Forms. And you could pick a logo. This is really just for aesthetic. It has nothing to do with functionality. All I would do is just pick other and click save. And then what you will see is once you've kind of created this, it'll go into your install tab and you'll have something that says Google Forms, right? So if I go to modify, this is where you'll be able to add capabilities to the integration. So I started with none, just all this basic information. I'll head over into extensions. And what you want to do is you want to do what's called create a trigger for workflows. This is what's able to receive that Google Form data and use this to start triggering things like onboarding or application requests. So here, this is where you give it a name. I could call this like Google Forms onboarding. You may want to place like a link to the script. So that way, if somebody needs to reference or a link essentially to the Google form or the script or the sheet, so that way somebody's able to reference this later. This would be helpful to just add to the description. After that, what we'll do is we'll generate a unique URL that's ready to receive this webhook data. What you're going to do with this is in Google Forms, we're going to copy this and basically have this ready to go as part of our configuration. So now that you have your URL to receive trigger data, what you're going to do is you'll notice after setting up the script, you'll notice that there's this BetterCloud tab now as a part of the sheet. I'll tell you it's ready. Tell you basically before you get started, you're going to want to go stepwise down these 3 steps. One is configure the script, just give us install permissions and we'll be ready to go with that admin that's able to work with BetterCloud. You're going to do an initial sync. This is really just to ensure that we're getting data over, we're setting up all the sheet correctly. And the third step is where you set up triggers. This is where you're actually going to paste that URL that you received earlier out of BetterCloud and ensure that we're able to receive that data. So this is once you have sent data. So basically submit a test form after you've pasted in that URL and submit a sample user. What that should do is it should allow you to go past that waiting circle and go to a screen that looks just like this, which confirms that BetterCloud has received the data, and then asks you basically to format how you'd like to get that response. You'll notice it comes in raw and it comes in this flat sort of structure, but what you could do with each field is define what you want it to look like in BetterCloud. And would you like to use it as a condition for workflows? So do you want to branch logic and do different onboarding scenarios based off what's being written into the titles, departments, and managers? The answer is usually yes on that. And then also, which of these do we want to start to plug in into different fields later in the workflow for things like emails and names and all those different important profile fields, and ensuring that we could go write that data out. So for the ones that I want to condition, I'll just check off which ones I want for if conditions. So I've done this for department manager, division type, just because I'm going to have different groups and OUs and all these different entitlements that have logic based off that. And I've almost set everything up as a dynamic field. So first names, last names, emails, all those department manager fields, because I'm going to be plugging these into the Google profile later and also using some of this logic later to condition some of the workflows and create profiles. This is a sample workflow that I set up using Google Forms. What you're seeing here is in my when statement. If you go under other, you'll notice that the one that I called onboarding form is now a trigger. And I'm using that as my when statement. And you'll notice in my if statement, anything that I've selected off to be an if condition is now available for me. Anything from department to division to type to manager, I can make those combinations here. And then in my then statement is the sample onboarding process. So I'm starting with something like Google and creating that user. You notice the way that I've started the Google create user action, I've plugged in fields directly from the form. So the ones that I've set as my dynamic fields, like first name, last name, and email, I'm basically plugging and playing into the respective fields to build the Google user. I'm also doing things like this later, where if, let's say, for hypothetically, I want to edit the user's profile, just click and drag that into my onboarding workflow. And this is where, for example, for that particular user that I created in step one, I could even be reading things like the department field, the title field, and ensuring that that information is being basically being created as a part of their onboarding as well. And I'm using these fields to plug and play through all my different SaaS applications like Jira, Salesforce, Slack, Zoom, and ensuring I'm referencing that form information to create those accounts and ensuring that, hey, from the IT perspective, I no longer need to manually review forms. I'll just have all the accounts created for me. Now I've saved all that time and now I'm able to do more strategic work for myself. So I hope this was informative. I hope this is going to save you time in your onboarding. I hope you get to hook into something as easy as enough as your HR process today using Google Forms. And this will inspire you to then create more automations, create more ways to save your team time, and ensuring that your employee experience on day one is a great and a productive one. So that way, all their accounts are ready to go. It's a win-win for everybody. Again, my name is Devin Domingo. Happy to talk more about what you've seen in today's demo. Please read the post through for more additional details and some of the specifics of these steps. And looking forward to working with you and your team in the future. So with that, enjoy the rest of your day.